Cindy James. Is this the lady who cried wolf? Or was she really just telling the truth the whole time?
Cindy Elizabeth Hack James was a 44-year-old nurse. She had graduated nursing school in 1966, worked as a nurse, and helped children who suffered from behavior and emotional issues at preschool. She was married to a man named Roy Makepeace, who was 18 years older than her. Back in July 1982, they separated. 4 months after the separation, the threats began. She had encountered physical attacks and threatening calls, and as time went on, the threats got worse. Her porch lights were smashed, there were prowling sounds outside her house at night, and she found 3 dead cats in her garden. It got to the point where she became scared to talk to the police as the threats got much worse, which in turn aided the police to question her stories. Eventually, the threats started becoming fatal. One night, Cindy's friend Agnes Woodcock came by to see Cindy and found her not to be answering the door. She knew Cindy loved taking baths and assumed that is why she wasn't answering the door. She walked around the house and found Cindy outside, with a stocking tied around her neck. Cindy said someone had come up behind her, grabbed her, and strangled her. Since the person came up from behind, the only feature Cindy could see were the white sneakers. This had eventually become enough for Cindy. She decided to move houses, change her name, paint her car, and hire a private investigator who went by the name Ozzy Caban.
I think it's pretty insane that the police just straight off the bat didn't believe her, and she went all the way to the length of hiring her own private investigator to almost prove that she wasn't lying. But would you not feel pretty let down by the police if they were just like...
If I was her, instead of just... If she's hired the private investigator to look for the guy or whatever, or to look into the case a bit more, I'd have somebody. I've had the private investigator looking at me at all times. If she's getting attacked, she's being harassed, all this stuff. If you pay this private investigator and say, look, keep your eyes on me at all times.
Yeah.
If it happens again,
we'll
then
catch him.
Boom, catch it, picture, whatever. It's 1982. Okay, yeah, we don't have iPhones. I don't think.
she can't say, I don't think Chip said, oh, good.
I'm sure if we get a legitimate private investigator and he goes to the police and he goes, yeah, saw it. I saw the guy, she got strangled,
here's some evidence.
She's being harassed. Maybe they get a picture on one of those big ones.
Them boxes.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think hiring the private investigator is a good idea, but my point is just that you would feel pretty let down that the police have sort of just said, you're waffling.
Yeah, it's true.
Unless...
Not taking it seriously.
Unless the police were told to not take it seriously.
Ooh, inside job?
Cindy had confided in Ozzy, much more than she had confided in the police, but he still felt as if she was holding back information. He talked to Cindy's parents, and they also agreed. They all came to the conclusion that Cindy knew the identity of the attacker, but was reluctant to share this knowledge because maybe the attacker had threatened to kill her family if she revealed their identity to the police. Ozzy was determined in trying to solve this case. He installed lights outside of her house and also gave her a two-way radio so they could easily communicate. One night, Ozzy heard weird noises coming from the radio and decided to go and check on Cindy rather than talking via the radio and potentially scaring away the attacker. So he went to Cindy's house to check what was going on. Upon arrival, he saw Cindy lying on the floor with a knife stabbed in her hand. Attached to the knife was a note which said, "You are dead, bitch." Ozzy took Cindy to the hospital and the police questioned her, but there were no leads to corroborate her story that she was attacked. It seemed to appear as if the attacker knew when to hide or attack in order to make the police question her story. When she was under surveillance or being guarded by the police, there were no threats or phone calls, nothing. But when the police were not around to witness her crimes, the threats reappeared. They also didn't believe Cindy was telling the truth, as she would still walk the dog at night, something they thought wouldn't happen if she was genuinely scared for her life. Finally, the phone calls were never long enough for the police to set up a trace. All of this made the police question her story. The police ended up giving Cindy a polygraph test and the results showed she was telling the truth. However, the police concluded that she was too traumatized to give any useful or real information.
All right, this is some BS. Now, me and Chip, as you guys know, across all of our episodes, we're not fans of polygraph tests in the first place. Like, lie detectors are so hot and cold, they don't get used for a reason. But do you not think it is pretty weird how the police were like, right, we're going to do a polygraph test. She aces it. It turns out she's telling the truth, at least according to the test. And all of a sudden, they turn around and go, actually, no, we don't really like the polygraph test because we reckon that you're traumatized to actually give any credible answers.
But if she failed that polygraph test, I feel like they'd be like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, they wouldn't have had a problem. They're like, yeah, that's what we thought. We figured she was lying. Let's move on. Do you know what I mean? I just feel like it was a lose-lose situation, and it is proving to make the police look a little bit more suspicious.
A little bit dodgy. Yeah, like gone off milk.
And not only that, to add to it, Ozzy, the private investigator, actually was surprised that the police didn't even try to take any fingerprints.
If they would have gone for fingerprints, might have got some. Even, the guy might have been wearing gloves, but still, you check for that.
Yeah, and maybe the fingerprints are on there, and it's hers. It could have worked both ways. It just really seems like the police had completely given up on her and the case before they'd even properly looked into it.
Unfortunately for Cindy, the threats continued. In December 1985, she was found lying in a ditch which was around 6 miles away from her house. She was half awake and had a nylon stocking wrapped around her neck again. She was wearing a men's work boot, glove, and had a needle mark on her arm. She suffered from hypothermia and couldn't recall what had happened. After this incident, her friend Agnes stayed at Cindy's with Agnes's husband, Tom, to look after her. On a day in April, the basement went up in flames and the phone stopped working. When Tom ran outside to ask for help, the only man who he encountered ran away. Could this have potentially been the attacker? All of these incidents led to the police questioning her story, and they especially believed the fire was set up by Cindy. The fire was set from inside, and for somebody to do that, it required them to enter the house via the window and climb in. However, there were no fingerprints found on the window, and the dust on the windowsill was still in place, something which would have been disturbed if somebody had tried to climb in. And so they believed Cindy set it up. After some time, her father believed this was all taking a massive toll on Cindy's mental health, and he became afraid she was considering suicide. To try and avoid this, he admitted her to a psychiatric ward, where she remained for 10 weeks. Shortly after her release, she admitted to those around her that she knew more about the attacker than she had said, and was wanting to deal with them herself.
This bit is where it gets a little bit more interesting with the fire in the basement. It looks like this is where I start to think, okay, maybe she did set this thing alight herself, going back to the windows, the dust was still there, all that. I do think though, I mean, if the basement was set on fire, do you not think a lot of the evidence and things like that in there would have just been messed up and gone anyways? They were talking about there were no fingerprints on the windows. Could potentially the fire have ruined that?
I mean, if the dust was still there though, then maybe the window was still intact and that bit wasn't affected by the fire.
No, that's fair. You know what that particular bit of this case reminds me of is the John Bonet of the bottom. Do you remember how they were, one of the theories was that the person went through the basement window pretty much, and I just feel like it's really similar. They didn't find any movement with
Why did they have to go through the window though? There's a door to the basement. Why have they ruled out the door completely? A guy could have been in there, opened the door, whatever. Does it have to be the window?
Yeah, it almost feels like at every moment in this case, they just try and wedge a way in there to make it seem like Cindy had done it herself.
Yeah. What's to stop a guy going in and opening the basement door and going down through there?
Yeah.
And I bet they were trying to rule that out and be like, oh, but look, they only could have gone through the window. There's no fingerprints, so it couldn't be anyone else. It has to be Cindy. I
agree with you. It does seem pretty strange. I find it interesting though that Tom ran out, right, and claims to have seen someone and then running away. That is really suspicious to me, because I think if there was a fire on or something, you'd probably hear it, smell it, or maybe even see it. I don't know.
You'd call the police. Or
you wouldn't just run away that.
You'd be helping.
Yeah, which makes me think: has this person just set it and
dashed it
and run away? Make sure it was on fire and then seen that it's on fire.
And then Tom has managed to get a catch of this person, just a glimpse.
If you were Tom, were you running after this person?
Probably, but I mean, it depends on the situation with the fire, because he's probably got to go back and help put it out. He has no reason to lie as well, by the way. This is
the Tom guy.
This is Cindy's best friend's husband.
Yeah.
So Why would he lie about seeing someone run away?
It's true. The other point as well is they were really sort of focusing in on the fact that Cindy had gone to a mental, like a psychiatric ward. But she was only really put in there because her dad was worried about like the mental state that she was in, because everyone had just essentially been saying that you're lying. Do you know how insane I would go if things were happening to me and everyone and the police of all people are saying, nah, you're lying. You would go a bit crazy.
And it didn't really help her case. Even though she was in there just because of that, it kind of
makes her look more crazy than she is.
It does. And now it leans towards the idea of maybe she did do it herself. Like it would have people thinking that, including the police even more so. So yeah, it's a bit of a sticky situation for Cindy here.
In October 1988, she was attacked again in her garage. She was found in her car, naked from the waist down, and again had a nylon stocking tied around her neck and hands with an additional piece of duct tape on her mouth. This attack led Cindy into a coma. Once she awoke, she told her family the attacks lessened and she felt better. On the 25th of May in 1989, she finally disappeared. Her car was abandoned at a parking lot and there was blood found on the door of the driver's side. Her items from her wallet were scattered under her car, and inside the car lay a wrapped present and groceries. On June 18, 1989, Cindy was found lying dead by an abandoned house a mile away from the shopping center. With her hands and feet tied behind her back, she had been drugged and strangled, but the Canadian police still believed that Cindy's death was an accident or a suicide due to her autopsy results and closed the case. The autopsy showed that she had died from drugs including morphine. The coroner ruled her death as an unknown event. Her parents, however, continued to believe she was murdered, despite the police's ruling.
How do you do this to yourself?
Yeah, the only thing that makes me think you would do this to yourself is if you had a mental illness, like she's schizophrenic or something.
Yeah, but even just like, if we just think about like what's happened here, like she had her hands tied behind her back, strangled. She also, like, she's committed suicide here, but her hands were tied behind her back. The morphine was in her. Now, I do get that she had access to morphine, right? I understand that, which obviously does make things a little bit suspicious, but committing suicide with your hands behind your back,
it's a tough thing to do.
While being strangled.
It's difficult.
There's so much weird stuff about this. And although this entire case almost wants to point to her being like crazy, and I just really struggle to see how she's done it herself.
At the same time, something makes me think, if this was someone else, why go out your way to make it look like it might not be her by tying her up, strangling her? Why not just pump her with the if you're going to kill someone, why would you make it look like she might have been killed?
Right, or even like give them a chance to make it
you would want everyone to think, oh look, she's just there, morphine, not tied up, she's
done it herself.
But no, if it is a killer, the killer has made it look like
they've given it a 50-50,
they've given it a 50-50 chance. Which you wouldn't do if you were a killer, or you wouldn't. Maybe the killer's enjoying it.
Maybe that's what I mean. Is there someone on the inside that just gets to hear all the details? They get to know everything. Is that why he can do what he's doing and almost just have the police completely dismiss this case as her being a nutter? Let's get into the theories now.
Was somebody really attacking Cindy? Was someone following her around and stalking her? Could it be a stalker or somebody she had previously rejected? It is quite difficult to do the things that were done to Cindy to yourself. If she was lying, why would she have moved house and uprooted her life? None of her friends nor family encountered anyone during all these threats. If somebody was threatening Cindy so persistently, would the family or friends have noticed someone lurking? Or why didn't Agnes bump into the attacker when she came to Cindy's house? Why did no one at the grocery shop see Cindy being attacked? The only situation where somebody could have seen the attacker was on the night of the fire when Tom ran outside for help. Cindy was a nurse and so would have had access to certain drugs. Did she take certain drugs and become paranoid?
Now this theory is the one that I want to gravitate towards. I really do think it was someone, and I can only imagine the frustration that she must have felt when just the entire police force is just like, no, lie detector, and you actually you passed it, essentially. Actually we're going to scrap that because you were probably too traumatized. There are a couple holes in this, right? And it was a point that you'd made earlier about the attacker has so far made it seem like she's doing it herself, or
it could be either or, it could be her, it could be an attacker.
So why, when he's gone to kill her, has he not made it look like that? That's the biggest part, is when she's died, it's looking like a 50-50. Now, people are saying one of the holes in this particular theory of it being someone else is like, how come nobody saw her get attacked or get grabbed at the grocery store? But I'm thinking is that an attacker that's been able to inflict this sort of almost torture over time, what makes you think that out in public they would just grab someone in eyesight like that? This is obviously someone way more calculated. It sounds like it almost happened in the car. This isn't happening in front of lots of people, so I'm not expecting eyewitnesses here. So that part of the hole in this theory I don't think it really matters. And then people are saying when the attacker is coming into the house, the PI didn't find anything, didn't find someone. Fair enough. I get that is a little bit suspicious, because especially a private investigator, you'd like to think they would have come up with something.
Yeah.
It is rumoured she was dating a police officer around the time, but it cannot be confirmed. But that would explain why the police didn't believe Cindy, nor take her polygraph test seriously. It would also make sense as to why the calls were never long enough to be traced. A case of inside knowledge.
So this theory of the rumour about her dating a cop, and then maybe because it was this cop, that the police were much more keen to dismiss it as her being nuts.
Yeah.
That could really play into it. I mean, I really like the idea, the theory that it was someone in the police, or someone with ties to the police, someone with a best friend there.
The police are just like looking after their own, which is wild. But
it's not uncommon.
We know that the police do that. There's been cases before, many cases, where the police will overlook certain things. And if there is somebody in the police force that's doing this, I wouldn't be surprised if they
were influencing the case.
Yeah, we'll say that.
A really interesting point about this person actually being in the police force is the fact that this attacker's phone calls, or supposed phone calls, were never long enough to be traced. Is this sort of information that you would only know if you were inside the force? Or is it just something that, maybe, like I said, we know this attacker, if there is one, is really smart.
Yeah.
Right? We know that. So them being able to know this bit of information would not be a surprise at all. But it is also just quite niche as well, and something that someone in the police would know.
She believed it to be Roy, her ex-husband. She told the police she thought it was him and they wanted to vet him out. Upon their arrival, he showed them his answering machine where there was a recording of someone leaving him death threats. He said he believed the caller to be Cindy and told the police he thought Cindy suffered from a split personality. Roy himself was a psychiatrist. However, Cindy did spend 10 weeks at a psychiatric clinic and was never diagnosed. This could be because they didn't test her for the diagnosis, but still, the doctors would have noticed some strange behaviours if she had a split personality. In addition, if she did have a split personality, her friends and family would have noticed something strange going on. Roy was a psychiatrist who also had access to drugs. Maybe their marriage was secretly abusive and Roy didn't want Cindy to separate from him. Maybe he played a role because he didn't want her to move on. Psychiatrists would know how to deal with needles and where to inject them, something which was done to her. Roy could have also had access to morphine.
I also like this theory. I think this one's good. It's the combination of, okay, maybe she had a split personality, but her ex-husband Roy, there's plenty of cases of jealous ex-husbands, ex-husbands attacking their previous partners, things like that. And in this one, what I find interesting is in the same way Cindy had access to medicine, so did Roy, because Roy was a psychiatrist as well.
Yeah.
So he would have had access to the morphine. Roy would know Cindy's routine. Roy is a smart person.
And he's a psychiatrist. He thought that she had a split personality. He would be in a position to be able to make that assessment.
Yeah.
But then again, she spent 10 weeks at a psychiatric clinic and was never diagnosed with a split personality. And you think that the doctors there, the psychiatrists there, would have spotted that pretty early doors.
Exactly. And I think by Roy saying, oh yeah, she had a split personality, is almost his way of deflecting it onto her to make it seem like she was just a bit nuts. Like, this wasn't me. Look, she's nuts. This can't have been me.
Yeah.
And even she believed, like Cindy believed it to be Roy.
She thought it was Roy, yeah. So it's either a case of, yes, she has this split personality, it took over her life and she killed herself.
Yeah.
And Roy's correct. Or Roy, something was wrong with that relationship. Roy wasn't happy that he couldn't be with her, whatever, and he's done all of this, and because he's a psychiatrist, everyone's going to believe Roy.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that is really interesting. Chip,
it's either one.
Wrap it up for me. What do you think? Seriously, because this is interesting. Do you think it was her?
I initially
Do you think it was a random attacker? Do you think it was Roy or someone in the police force?
I don't think it was a random attacker. I was initially leaning towards the idea if she was a schizophrenic or she had a split personality, but now I'm starting to think that it was Roy.
I like the idea of Roy as well. I feel like he's smart enough as well to maybe know the bit of information about the idea that calls can't be traced under a certain length of time. The only thing we don't really have is like a motive for Roy. There was nothing here that said like, was he cheated on? Do you know what I mean? Is he the jealous ex-husband? Is there anything pointing?
I mean, this could explain why she never wanted to be more open about who she thought the attacker was.
Yeah.
It's because it was her ex-husband who she probably still loved or whatever, and she didn't want him to go to prison. But I mean, it's hard to make that call.
It really is. So yeah, anyways guys, that's gonna wrap up this case from us. We'd love to hear what do you guys think happened here. Let us know between one of those 4 options we mentioned. As always, if you are new around here, then hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell.
Yes.
We are also over on Spotify, so if you just want to listen to us waffle, you are more than happy to do that as well. We will see you guys on the next episode of Mystery Mondays.